while they haven't even gotten to cast their Wilderness Reclamation yet, and so on.
Yeah, and that goes both ways. If it's really important for Mono Red to be on the play, it's really important for their opponent, to want to be on the play instead to negate that advantage. And we see a nice curve out here for Alexander Gordon Brown. We'll shift those names around on the Mardu Winota deck. Lazartep Reaver, you want cards that create these bodies for Winota, but sometimes that can just gum up the battlefield and create some good chump blockers too.
Yeah, that's one of the nice things about this Mardu Winota deck that Alexander Gordon Brown has brought in particular is how good it is at just clogging up the battlefield with Lazartep Reavers and even Basri's Lieutenant, and just giving a sort of insulation against any small ball removal that Paul Wu is going to have.
And meanwhile, Paul Wu, very quick out of the gates here. Fervent Champion into his choice of Robert the Rich and Runaway Steamkin, and then some cheap red cards to follow that up with. We've got Castle Embereth to help push more damage through, so a fast start for Paul Wu, and we'll see if the start from Mardu Winota can contend with that.
At this point, I would expect Wu to lean into Runaway Steamkin, just because you know that this Mardu Winota deck that Gordon Brown has brought is not going to be great at just having removal on the fly, so you might actually be able to get a runaway with the Steamkin.
Absolutely. And the 1-2, very awkward here for the 1-1 Fervent Champion, so we see Shock deal with that instead. Now we get to attack with a 1-1, get a point of damage in, and now cast our light out the stage. 2 copies of Anax Halton in the Forge. We'll get to deploy one of those at least. And you see the mana-based difficulties that Mardu Winota can have sometimes, having to play the Triumph on turn 3. So we have perfect mana now, but we don't get to make a turn 3 play because that came into play tapped.
And this is one of the big struggles of aggro decks this format, and why we see so many monocolor versions of aggressive strategies is mana. The drawbacks on all of it, it seems, is entering the battlefield tapped and not really having a way to mitigate that, which means that these aggressive decks are just not going to be as fast out the gates, and they're frequently going to have to be taking their first and or third turns off.
Yeah, we've seen mono red aggro, mono green aggro, and mono black aggro all in our tournament today. Mono white aggro was the talk of the town for a hot minute. The only mono-colored aggro deck we haven't seen so far in the standard is mono blue aggro. But maybe now I've manifested that, brought that into existence for a future week.
Ooh, speaking of for a future week, how do you feel about Judith the Scourge Diva being exiled by this Robber of the Rich? That's such a good hit for Paul Wu.
Hey, if that was a mono red card, you would strongly consider playing that in your mono red deck. So a really nice hit there for Robber the Rich.
Yeah, that card is really nice here. Good grief.
And now Gordon Brown has to decide how best to put the shields up.
Yeah,
has
this
the
is
option
a
of
spot
Roast
where
Rider. It has to choose between Roast Rider and Judith the Scourge Diva.
I guess theoretically you could shock in a Blood Crypt and develop Basri's Lieutenant as a couple of blockers that replace themselves if they die.
That could work as well. 4/5 is going to be the biggest thing on the board, or you could pump up the 1/1 to make it a little better in combat.
Hard to feel too bad about a Chillwind Yeti mixed with a piloted Shredder, you know?
How deep of a cut would you say that is on balance?
I mean, we're on Twitch, so I imagine a solid 65% of our base knows the game I'm referencing here.
we are in gamer territory here. Paul Wu decides to use that shock on the 1/1 zombie token before the Battery's Lieutenant can give a payback on the way out. But that 4/5 now is a nice way to gun up the battlefield. We can follow it up with a second copy next turn, or another combination of plays.
Yeah, this is a tough one where at this point, Wu just may feel priced into trying to go ahead, get this attack in for a point or two in order to just cash in this Robber of the Rich for something like that Judith the Scourge Diva we saw previously, if Wu thinks that would just be an upgrade to this Robber of the Rich.
Yeah, we see Paul Wu starting to flood out a little bit here. That fifth land not doing too much for him. And he hasn't drawn away like Torbrand, like Embercleave to really force a lot of damage through. Judith kind of can do the same job that way, but not as reliably as those two cards. And you think back to earlier in this game where Paul Wu managed to light up the stage into 2 copies of Anax. We know he could only cast one of them, decided to cast none of those in the end, and Anax has really not played a factor in this game at all.
Yeah, this is a situation where before we've seen players like Brandon Burton really sandbag light up the stage until he felt like he could get value out of both of the cards no matter what. And here, it felt like Paul Wu just sort of really paved the way for that light up the stage, only to not use the cards it gave.
Yeah, and we see in decks like, for example, the mono red prowess deck in Modern, where your mana curve is so low that you can guarantee a light up the stage. You can chain all of those cards together virtually all the time. That's really not the case in standard with this mono red deck. If you get 2 3-drops or a 3-drop and a 4-drop, and you're lighting out the stage on turn 2, there's no guarantee you can actually use either of those cards. And look at this! Winota is in play off the Robber of the Rich. Really using Gordon Brown's best cards against him here.
What do you think is more valuable, a 4/4 for 4, or the best Bolt Hound to ever see play in a mono red deck?
It is unfortunate that Fervent Champion is a human, so we're not looking at getting Winota triggers anytime soon, but just having a 4/4 with Castle Embereth to make it a 5/4, maybe that's enough to bust through this Battery Lieutenant, although we could see a second one come down. We could set up a Venerated Logs on turn if we're that way inclined.
Winota wouldn't happen to be a rogue, would she?
I'm going to do the quick search.
I have to look. I'm looking it up.
I'm going to say no.
I'm guessing no. But you know what? Honestly, with all the text on Magic cards these days, would it even be shocking? No, she's a warrior.
Hidden Rogue is like Hidden Reach, which Robber the Rich coincidentally has. One of the few red cards in history to boast that ability.
Look, when Brazen Borrower turned out to be a rogue, that's the point where I just felt like I had to do a Robber of the Rich check for every card I ever might put it in the same deck as. Ooh!
Oh, okay, so
we're just... corner!
Yeah, we're loading up cannons on this original Battery Lieutenant. Chunking it for 5 with Vigilance, we get to hold that back still as the biggest thing on the board. And now even Castle Embereth can't promote Winota to be big enough to get through it, although Bonecrusher Giant can help to finish it off.
And the nice thing about this big Basri's Lieutenant is it also is naturally insulated against an Ember Cleave.
That's a very good point too. Yeah, that would only boost up a Winota to a 5/5.
Right, so if it were 2 4/5s in the face of that Ember Cleave, instead Winota would cleanly chunk through that. But now things are a little bit dicier for Paul Wu.
Yeah, they're Seamkin. And we can send in Winota threatening a trade of sorts. I think Alexander Gordon Brown will know what that means if Winota crunches in. The Bonecrusher Giant, or the Shock, I suppose, is basically face up at that stage.
And so now with that information,
Gordon Brown deciding how he wants to handle this turn. He may decide it's worth his while just to force Paul Wu, use that stomp mode, and then he still gets 2 Night Tokens back from it.
Yeah, this is the kind of attack where Alexander Gordon Brown's life total is low enough. You can't not block. But you do feel like you want to make the attack. The problem is, Basri's Lieutenant has a lot of text, and part of that is protection from multicolor. Which means that this Bonecrusher Giant is not actually going to finish it off.
And a third Basri's Lieutenant off the top here for Gordon Brown.
Now if any of these creatures with tokens on them die, they are going to make 3, count them, 3 2/2 Knights.
And the vigilance is so big here for Gordon Brown. He doesn't have to make tough choices about what to attack with and what to hold back. He gets to do it all.
This feels almost like something similar back when Humans and Spirits were huge in Modern, where you would have these heads-up matchups where both decks are super fine against the likes of KCI in the combo decks. But in the heads-up, one side of the battlefield just gets to completely dictate combat and choose the level that it gets to engage on. And in that case, it was with flying. Here, it's because of vigilance. Now, Paul Wu just can't ever really attack because of how big all the things on Gordon Brown's side of the battlefield are, but can't really block for the same reason.
What I took away from that was you want a deck like KCI in Standard. Am I on the money there?
Yeah, no, you can check out my Kethis article last week over on SCG, and that'll tell you all you need to know about my feelings on Chromatic Sphere and Friends.
Yeah, I know you're a kindred spirit on that one. So this needed to be a big draw set for Paul Wu. Scorch Spitter, not such a big draw set by any metric.
That's a guaranteed point of damage. Show some respect.
And now Judith is going to make Paul Wu's life even more difficult.
A nice draw, if you will.
And Paul Wu has to turn us to blocks on this turn, and he can't even really do something like put Bonecrusher Giant in front of the 4/4 to try and trade it off that way, because that now would translate to lethal, and then also that Lieutenant Die would give us a Judith trigger on the way out.
Yeah, now there's just this situation where you can get in front of the 6/6 with just the Scorch Spitter to try and maximize the amount of damage you have on the way back, but then if you go to 1, even something like, let's say, Ember Cleave off the top, that first strike hit is going to kill a creature, and you'll die before you even make it to regular combat damage.
And with what is currently 15 toughness of Vigilant Blockers, plus 10 life, Ember Cleave is not going to be lethal, but that is the one kind of card that conceivably could get Paul Wu back in this game, so I'm sure that's at the front of Golden Brown's mind.
Oh, trading away almost his entire battlefield.
So we make some trades, and you get nothing, and I get 3 knights and 2 damage, split however I like. And
how about...
And look at this, these knights even get to Convoke out of Venerated Loxodon.
Jeez.
We just get to do it all.
How do you feel about a mountain?
In general or right now?
I don't know, this one that's kind of looking more like a molehill to me.
I'm already a little skeptical of basic mountains, and right now it not looking great. So Golden Brown will take the first game. We'll go to a game 2 here between Mono Red Aggro and Mardu Winoda, and you see those 2 Devout Decrees immediately jumping into the deck for Golden Brown. I imagine the Eliminate will come along for the ride too, but the rest of his sideboard not really equipped for this kind of aggressive deck. We see, Blight Beetle, an excellent card against Mono Green, Noxious Graft, same thing. Not that many cards that are targeted against Mono Red.
Right, most of what this Mardu Winoda deck is actually trying to attack are those spell-based decks, and trying to customize the reactive cards you have to most adequately be suited for what those decks are bringing to the table. Against things like Mono Red Aggro, or any of the monocolor decks for that matter, a lot of your plans are going to kind of be focused on tanking up on the ground with cards like Raise the Alarm, like Lazotep Reaver, and then having Winoda to be able to go over the top later, or Basri's Lieutenant to just completely lock up the ground and not feel that different than something like a Gideon, ally of Zendikar, when it comes to stopping these aggressive strategies from being able to punch through.
And then for Paul Wu, we have an interesting medley of sideboard cards here. We have some color hoses in Redcap Melee and Unchained Berserker, as well as Scorching Dragonfire, which just generically is a strong card against this strategy. But with that in mind, Golden Brown can try and de-emphasize some of the white creatures that are weaker against Berserker, as well as spot removal, or de-emphasize some of the red creatures that can be traded with added profit for Wu by Redcap Melee.
So here, what we see Wu doing is really trying to reduce the cards that are completely blanked by Alexander Gordon Brown having just a couple of creatures on the battlefield. That's why we see those copies of Light Up the Stage, those copies of Chandra, Scorch Spitter sitting out on the bench, because those are all cards that just kind of stare at a 2/2 and stop working. Whereas even something like Unchained Berserker, it's going to get embarrassed by the card Lazotep Reaver, but otherwise it's kind of clear for takeoff, and it's going to be able to punch through a wall of giant white blocking creatures.
And we see a less aggressive start, but still a solid hand for Paul Wu in this game. Removal spell, and then the curve of Robert into Anax, which may actually make an appearance here in this game.
Yeah, I don't think he can ever throw back Robber of the Rich into Anax on the play.
And then Sacred Foundry, a crucial pickup for Golden Brown. A hand with good mana, good curve. We have the Dex Native card in Winoda. We've got some sources of creatures in Lazotep Reaver, an interaction spell in Devout Decree, which happens to line up very nicely against Anax.
Yeah, this is the reason why you play Mardu Winota. Look how clean, how smooth this looks. Gold cards on raid are just frequently going to be powerful than their monocolored counterparts. So when there isn't really a barrier to casting them and your mana just looks good, those games feel unlosable.
And the choice of, do you want to Devour Decree that Rob of the Ridge, or play a Lazartep Reaver, which, between that and the army that you amass, lines up very well against the Robber, but if there's a way to swat one of those creatures out of the way, then the Robber gets to come in once again.
And now you can see Wu kind of weighing if you want to trade that Robber in for just the Lazatep Reaver. Or get a 3-for-1 with Bone Crusher Giant? Is it a 3-for-1 since you still have the Bone Crusher Giant left over, I think?
Gordon Brown decides not to risk that. He'll just take the 2 damage down to 14. And now Devour Decree can tag the Annex. Or we can just play Judith.
Right, there's so much incentive here to play just conservatively when Judith is going to let your cards trade 1-for-1, and Winota is also just going to make them worth so much on their face.
And Gordon Brown, maybe even considering an attack now. He knows that it's going to be difficult to line up those blockers in a profitable way anyway, so why not sneak in 2 damage while you have the opportunity? Oh, but look at that. Torbrand off the top for Paul Wu. Perfectly fine way to spend your 4 mana here.
Also gotta feel great if you're in Gordon Brown's seat, knowing that it's just a land coming off this Robber of the Rich when you make it to combat. This Torbrand is one of the ways that Wu can actually close the door while Gordon Brown is still developing.
And here we go. It's going to be an attack 4-4 from Robber of the Rich. But now the coast is clear for Gordon Brown to land Winota. And that Winota just staying back as a 4-4 blocker as well. Maybe just a ticker here.
Yeah, just having a way to go ahead, develop that Winota now, attack with your other creatures, get some bodies, and then throw Winota under the proverbial bus. Just kind of turn Winota into a collected company that gained 4 life. And you can't feel bad about that.
Yeah, I've seen Winota be experimented with in some older formats, and in a format like Modern, you have cards like Seasoned Pyromancer that you can hit with it, where you can commit some attacks with Winota and expect to have some blockers back afterwards because you're making these untapped tokens, you're getting other stuff on the battlefield. That is really the case with this version of the Winota deck. So if you're making this all-out attack, you're exposing yourself to a lethal attack on the swing back, so you're hoping that you can get the job done right here, right now. But just hitting a General's Enforcer.
General's Enforcer is huge here.
Yeah, it's only 1 hit, but it might be actually the perfect hit for Gordon Brown, because now that Winota is the perfect blocker, the best blocker you could hope for.
Right, Winota is protecting General's Enforcer till end of turn, and General's Enforcer is protecting Winota until Paul Wu can do something about it, which... The odds of that are not looking good here.
An Embercleave here would be lethal. So Gordon Brown crossing his fingers and praying. But we know that Paul Wu doesn't have it, and Gordon Brown's going to know that soon.
Yeah, you can almost feel Gordon Brown just thinking to himself, this turn, this is the turn, if I can fade it. If Paul Wu doesn't have the Embercleave right now, I think I can make it through.
And it is so dispiriting facing down Winota on the other side of the battlefield, knowing you just about survived the first attack, but you can't stop the second one. And the Lord only knows what that Winota trigger is going to turn up.
On the other hand, think about it this way. There's only 1 token left for this Winota, so you could stomp the token.
We could, yeah. And then at that point, Gordon Brown doesn't really have good attacks anymore.
Yeah, at that point, Winota would just be a vanilla 4-4.
We also could attack and then Stomp can take down the General's Enforcer, thanks to Torbrand.
Ooh.
And then whichever creature gets blocked can take down the Winota. And if Golden Brown doesn't block, the Bonecrusher Giant just finishes him off with Stomp.
All right, Gordon Brown, what do you got?
Winota jumps in front of Torbrand. So this forces Paul Wu's hand on the stomp. So Paul Wu also loses his best card, but Golden Brown is now down to 6. We have an Anax in reserve, and if Robber of the Red gets to attack again, we have Venerated Loxodon, of all things, available to us.
And, a duplicate 3-drop of a legendary that's already in hand is not what the doctor ordered for Gordon Brown this turn.
Absolutely not. It means you have a little more freedom to trade off the first copy without feeling too bad about it, and it does muck up combat here to some degree. But Paul Wu now has an opening in this game to kind of play like the Winota deck. He'll get to Convoke out of Venerated Loxodon. Lots of options available to him.
This is such a close turn.
And here's Anax, and Runaway Steamkin now a 4/4, so that one can happily and safely jump into combat.
Or
hey, yeah, how about this too? Just play out everything I have access to?
Okay. Shove. Love it.
And that Anax means that even the stuff that dies from Paul Wu's side, that board is going to be just as big on the following turn, and Gordon Brown's board will have been whittled down, and he's going to have taken some damage on the way out.
Right, this is a situation where, honestly, Paul Wu is in pretty good shape.
Yeah, it seemed like he was falling far behind in the game, and, that turn seemed to come down to, can I find Embercleave or not? But he has managed to turn this one around.
Wow. Looking at blocking Steamkin over Robber of the Rich with 2 cards exiled under Robber, that's a loud message.
So Gordon Brown down to 5. No board to speak of here.
A lot of Anax triggers, bringing friends.
That sick land means Gordon Brown can deploy Tajik and Judith on this turn.
Well, casting spells is better than the alternative.
But now we can't even attack with these. And Paul Wu can just rumble in with everything once again. Oh, Castle Embereth is just lethal. That's it.
Oh my god! Paul Wu is going to force a game 3, going for the clean 8-0 in the Swiss rounds of the first SCG Tour Online Championship Qualifier of Season 2. Oh my god.
So back to sideboarding here.
Take more of this. Good lord.
That was a swingy game for sure. Are there any cards from either player here that jump out as maybe having much greater utility or much less utility in play versus draw?
One of the big ones that sticks out is possibly looking at a copy of Kinrith Return King for Marty Winota as a source of life gain to kind of stabilize one of your better hits if you think you're more likely to be triggering Winota on the play. I understand.
I'm in for it.
It looks like Alexander Gordon Brown's not going to bring it in, and you can see why, right? It is ultimately an expensive card up front, but it is an angle you can look at exploring if you think that a lot of these games are going to be win and lost on the margins of just a couple of points of life. Just like that last game where we saw Wu win the game by 1 point.
And if you think that you're only realistically going to get time for Kenrith via Winota, then it's harder to rely on that post-board when your opponent has 3 copies of Red Cap Melee that you know about.
Exactly.
And so here for Gordon Brown, we're missing a color. We're missing that red mana that we need to cast Winota. The rest of the hand is strong, but we need the mana to cooperate here.
And this is just the kind of risk you have to take when having one of these sort of greedier, multicolored aggro decks.
General's Enforcer, not a land, but it is a good 2-drop that can protect Winota on a crucial turn, so not the worst draw for Gordon Brown by any means.
Is Paul going to let Alexander Gordon Brown get in for this point?
The mind games.
At this point, if I'm in Wu's seat, I'm just firing it off. They know I have it.
You have to. Like, if you play another card that could potentially be shocked, then the Selfless Savior can still protect that. So by taking the point, first of all, you take a point, but then you also give Gordon Brown that choice potentially. So I think you just have to shock the Savior now.
All right. Gordon Brown has the cat. Paul Wu has a dog. Who you got?
I would say I'm generally team cat, but I don't know on this one.
You know what? Honestly, I knew we'd be great casting partners from day one. Perfect. Nothing but respect for my Dom Harvey.
I missed the brief moment on MTG Arena where the cat animation was lagging the client, and by spamming your opponent's cat over and over again, you would actually cause server-side lag for your opponent. Which some very quick patching needed to deal with that one. But look at this. Unchained Berserker holding that General's Enforcer in play, and we couldn't even use Devour Decree to swat it out of the way if we wanted to.
Yeah, this Woe Strider has a lot of work to do against this copy of Unchained Berserker. And with a Bone Crusher Giant in hand, we may even just see Annex Embercleave slam this door shut on Alexander Gordon Brown if they don't get something together soon.
Yeah, Embercleave's going to be a nice way to finish off this game for Paul Wu. Luckily for Gordon Brown, it's almost fortunate that the protection from white does not even tempt him into Devour Decreeing this, because now we have it back in reserve for the Annex.
Yeah, this is a situation where you likely just feel priced into taxing that Annex. We saw the kind of work that it did against Alexander Gordon Brown's Marty Winota deck last game, because this is a matchup that's just kind of defined by combat math.
And a second Basilisk Lieutenant, the card seen off the scry for Gordon Brown, he already has the first one. He has a Winota as well. He has his 4-drops covered. The Basilisk Lieutenants work very well together. Is there an argument for keeping the second one, or are we digging for something cheaper or maybe more specific?
I think the biggest thing at this point you're looking for is a way to check this copy of Unchained Berserker. That's the card that is threatening to run away with this game. You already have a Winota, you already have a Basilisk Lieutenant. You have things that can kind of turtle up on the battlefield if you get there. The problem is if this Woe Strider gets answered by something like a Bone Crusher Giant or a Shock, which you know Paul Wu still has both of in his deck post-board, you might just lose the game on the spot.
And here's the rubber. No card off that rubber this time, but still gets 2 damage in. And Golden Brown is now down to 8. Do love a good Valley Dasher.
Oh, and this is just such a brutal spot. Is this lethal?
So we stomp Gordon Brown down to 6, and then Embercleave on... Yeah, Embercleave...
Well, you can stomp Woe Strider, attack with both, Embercleave on your Unchained Berserker, which can't be blocked, and that's 8.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see Paul Wu with the clean 8-0 sweep in a matchup that looked like he was so far behind, but he just keeps capitalizing on these mana advantages.
Yeah, there was a point in that last game where we thought Gordon Brown was about to lock up a top 8 berth, but Paul Wu managed to turn that game around, and winning this one in decisive fashion too. Paul Wu is going to be atop our standings at 8-0. He will be the first seed for as many top 8 matches as he gets to play, and because he's on the play, there could be quite a few of those.
Yeah, this is something where Paul Wu saw people winning with red deck wins. It's the great way to attack the format, and you know what? Why not play the red deck? It has wins in the name.
And this is not your grandmother's red deck. We have to make do with some scrappy cards, let's say, like Scorch Spitter, like Tin Street Dodger in some builds. But the reward for that is you get Annex, you get Torbrand, Embercleave, Bone Crusher Giant. These are historically strong red cards. So there is a certain feast and famine element to this mono red deck, but when this deck is good, it is terrifying to play against, and you saw that there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a situation where, unlike the Ramanap era of mono red standard, there are some sacrifices